Of the CattleUSA Daily Podcast. Today, we are welcoming back Paige Harding, not only a dear friend of mine, but also just an amazing resource and attorney from Southwest Kansas. Paige has come on to the podcast a few times now and talked about a lot of different things. One of her main things has been estate planning and what that is and breaking it down. Today, Paige is coming on and we are breaking down the nitty-gritty of some things that maybe we don't always think about with estate planning, and a practical resource that every single person can take away from today to start chipping away at the very daunting aspect of estate planning and just making your life a little bit simpler and making it really simple, especially for the people that you are leaving behind and leaving your legacy to. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this podcast with Paige. But before we do, if you could take 5 seconds to go like, subscribe, rate, review, do all of the things. We really appreciate it here at the team. It takes half a second to go do those things on whatever platform that you are on. It just means the world to us to continue to keep you guys engaged and updated and be able to bring you these podcasts every single day. So take a couple seconds while we do this intro to go ahead and do that down below. And let's hop into this podcast with Paige. Paige, welcome back to the podcast. We are so excited to welcome you back on and to talk a little bit more about estate planning and just everything that goes along with that, and the logistics of being a farmer and a rancher and what that looks like and what leading our legacies and leaving them down for the next generation looks like. Today, we are here to talk about something extremely exciting, and I'm so excited to have you on and talk about it. You recently created the Estate Planning Essential Information Guide. Dive into that for me. What is it? Share all the things.
Yeah, so I recently created the Estate Planning Essential Information Guide. And this is not a legal document at all. This is really just a practical resource for you and your family to use to keep track of all of your accounts, passwords, where your documents are at, where your safes are at, if you have a safety deposit box. Just really key information like that a lot of times your estate plan doesn't really cover. This will make your family's life just a little bit easier after someone passes away and your family is experiencing the grieving process. If you have this tool, this will help to make the transition of some of those important accounts a lot easier and more manageable for your family.
So why is this important to have, even if someone already has an estate plan?
Because your will and your trust can tell your family who gets what, but it doesn't tell them where to find it or how to access it. So you can have the best legal documents in the world, but if your spouse doesn't know the password to your bank account or the name of your insurance company, where the safe is, where you have a safety deposit box located, they're still going to hit roadblocks, and this guide will help to close that gap.
Lord knows that I need you to email me this real quick because I need to be spending some time filling this out. My husband does know that there's pretty much a universal password that if you know that password, you can probably get into my bank account or my Instagram account all at the same time. But holy cow, I can just think about right now how many things I have that have passwords to them that I need to write all of that down. And it's tedious and it's annoying, but it is probably so worth it because you never know what's going to happen. And it's one of those situations that it's better to be prepared. So can you give a quick overview of what all is inside of this guide and break all of that down for us?
Absolutely. So this first goes over personal information, starting as simple as your full legal name, and then going into where are your important documents located? Where's your estate plan even located at? You cannot imagine how many times I have people walk into my office and they have a loved one who has recently passed away and they can't find the will or the trust. They know that it exists. They know that it is somewhere, but they can't find it. So why get a will or a trust if you're not going to know and keep track of where those important documents are? It also goes into things such as organ donor status, the combinations to the safe. Then it goes into some key contacts. So who's the attorney that your loved one used, the accountant, the insurance agent, the doctor, the vet. Those are some very important things for farmers and ranchers. Who was the FSA agent that you worked with a lot? Was there a financial agent that you worked with often? Then we go into some property information. Where are the deeds, titles to vehicles? This is another huge one. People walk into my office every single day and don't know where the titles to vehicles or equipment are located. So that's something that is a huge relief if people have filled out this document. Things such as utilities. Who is your electricity provider, propane, internet, account numbers and logins for all of this information can be found if someone has filled out this sheet. Then we go into financial accounts, bank accounts, credit cards, even Venmo and PayPal. That's something that, as estate planning evolves, as we evolve as a society, estate planning has to evolve with it. So Venmo and PayPal, those didn't exist, 30 years ago, but they're very prevalent and used on a daily basis today. Insurance policies, online accounts and subscriptions, email. That's a huge one. My email is my life. Everything is on, my personal email and my work email. And I know that many other people are in the exact same boat. So what's your email account and password so that people can deactivate those accounts? Streaming services, loyalty programs, things like that. And then we even can go into social media accounts and then things such as mortgages to student loans. So it's basically an entire roadmap of your life's practical details. And I fill this out. I give it to all of my clients as a hard copy sheet. And they'll write it in with pencil, and I'll say, bring it back to me and let me type that up for you so we can read your handwriting.
That is so real, because I think if I handed that to my dad today, it would, especially, once you get halfway through and you're like, I have been sitting here for 2 hours filling this out, it really turns into chicken scratch after that. And you're like, is that an S or a 5? What is that supposed to be? And then you're sitting there trying to figure it out. And luckily, we live in a digital age where we have so many blessings of being able to have access to all of these things and having emails and centrally located items. But at the same time, it's like, I have a Google Passwords manager, but if you don't know the password to my email account, you can't get into my Google Passwords manager. And good luck getting in and being able to pay our electric bill if you can't figure out my password, type of thing like that. That you don't think about until you actually sit down and you're like, okay, sadly, if I left the face of the earth tomorrow, my husband would not only be grieving, but he would be scrambling, trying to figure out how to pay our mortgage, how to pay our electric bill, how to get into all of these different accounts that I manage. And it's just the reality of the situation and so important. But this guide did not just come out of nowhere for you. It actually has a really personal story. I would love it if you could take a second to share that side of the story behind you creating this guide.
Yes, absolutely. So the first time that this really hit me, that something like this was a necessity for my clients, was a few months ago. A family came in who had just lost their adult son. And I'm still a new attorney, so each time I see one of these instances, I think, oh, this is just a one-off situation. That was a fluke deal. And I'm starting to realize that almost everything is a fluke deal. Everything's an interesting situation. So like I said, this family just came in who had lost their adult son. And he was about at the age where he had just transferred everything over to his own name. He had his own cell phone bill, had bought his own car, had a mortgage, and literally recently had just switched most of these major life accounts over to himself. Sadly, he had passed away. And he didn't have an estate plan yet, which is pretty common at his age. But the real problem was that no one had access to all of this information because he had literally just created it. So they couldn't access his credit cards. They couldn't access his phone provider, even his basic bills like his water bill. They had trouble getting into that because everything was password protected. You had to jump through a bunch of hoops. But even if they had the legal authority to do that, that would have helped. That would have helped a step in this process, but they didn't have the exact details that they needed to get access to all of these accounts. So it was heartbreaking to watch this family who had suffered a serious tragedy. It's always horrible when a child passes away before their parent. But they were also having to try to scramble and find out all of this information so that they could pay the bills and turn off his phone, things like that. That was the first time that this hit me, that a tool like this was needed. So fast forward to a couple of months, I was attending the K-State Research and Extension's Leaving a Lasting Legacy conference that was for farm, ranch, and women. And the very first speaker that was at that conference was a young woman who had just lost her husband. She was a mother of 3, so she was grieving her husband who had unfortunately passed in a tragic death, was taking care of 3 little kids, running the farm and ranch operation, and trying to find out how to access those accounts to do so. So she spoke about how her husband was the financial guy in her family. He paid all the bills, he did everything. She ended up having to completely switch phone companies because she did not know the information to get into their cell phone provider. So she had to completely switch phone companies. Just everything, she said, felt like brick wall after brick wall. She just kept on running into roadblocks. So it was heartbreaking again to hear this woman who was grieving her husband, raising 3 kids, running a farming and ranch operation, and trying to figure out how to access all of this financial information because she had never been the person in her family to do that. So that's when it hit me that, wow, this tool is very much needed. This is something that I want to give to my clients because I don't ever want a single one of my clients walking in again and having to face that difficulty as they're in the grieving process. And I'm not going to lie, this estate planning downloadable form is pretty in depth. I would start and go one section at a time, try to fill out one section per day because it's a lot of information and it's going to be annoying to track down, but I cut it down a lot. I cut it down to the most bare bones as much as I thought that it would be attainable for the average person. And I give it out to all of my clients now because I think that if you have this information in place and readily available when an unforeseen tragedy strikes, you're prepared in that aspect and you can focus on the grieving process or taking care of your loved ones.
So the basis of everything with this was that, like, this was born out of seeing other people's struggles.
Exactly. I wanted to create something free, simple, and easy to fill out that could prevent those kinds of challenges. And this is something that people can do at home without a lawyer. Like I said, this is not a legal document. This is just a practical tool to help you keep your affairs in place.
That makes total sense. And I know, like, I'm immediately, Paige, like, I need you to email me this actually, like, right after we get off of this. Can you dive in a little bit deeper on the specifics of what's in the guide and how exactly it works so that we can get just like a little bit of a bigger idea of like what is actually in there?
Let me actually take a look at this. So we go through personal information, key contacts, property information, utilities and household services. Those include the phone lines. And that's been the biggest issue that I've seen is phone providers over the years, financial accounts, and insurance. Another thing that we go through, like I said, the biggest issues that I see people facing are sometimes, farmers and ranchers have so much property that they forget how much property that they have. And it will be titled in different LLCs, trusts, or in people's names personally. So that is a place. I only have 2 blanks for the property description. And I know my farmers and ranchers need more than that, but that's a big thing to hit on. The location of spare keys. That is another huge one. I had a client the other day who there are 4 siblings, mom and dad passed away, and they were looking to get all of the keys to each piece of farm equipment that they had. And in the pantry was a huge basket, literally just full of keys. So the family was having to go through. They said it took them an entire weekend to go through and grab each key and try to put it in each piece of equipment because there were just so many. So that is another thing people don't think of. And then the last thing that I want to hit on is vehicle titles, where those are located. That is a huge one. I have people all the time who come in and cannot find the titles to vehicles. So then it makes it much, much harder to get those transferred because we'll have to do a quiet title action first. So if you just know where those types of things are, that will save your family a lot of headaches down the road.
And I think like the biggest thing with this is the fact that you're saving the headaches down the road. You're trying to make this as simple and easy as possible. And that's why we have estate plans in general, is so that our family members can go through a grieving process without having to stress about all of the million other things that go along with death and with loss and everything that goes along with that. That's not fun to talk about or not fun to go through. And it's not going to be fun to sit down and write down all of your passwords. But like, if I think about it, holy cow, I have hundreds of accounts that if I were to pass away, my husband needs access to.
Yep.
Everything, like from as minuscule as social media to as important as our mortgage and like titles of our vehicles and everything like that, that he has an idea of where they're at. But at the same time, having it written down and then probably uploaded to a Dropbox, put in our safe, like everywhere else, is probably so important. But this doesn't replace the legal documents that we need. We still need an estate plan. We still need a will. Can you break that down?
Yep. So, like I said, this is not a legal document, just a practical tool. You still need the estate plan in place to, discuss everything from distribution to saving you in case of potential disability. So, both of these things go hand in hand. You need the practical tool, which is downloadable. The link will be in the show notes, or you could go to our website to find that. And you also need the estate planning documents themselves, because those things will help you in case of potential disability and then direct the distribution of your assets. I get so excited because every time I am doing a complicated probate case or some sort of wonky situation, I always hear the younger generation who is having to handle that. They say, oh, I'm going to do this, so much better so that my kids don't have to deal with this someday. And this is the very first document I hand them. I say, go home and fill this out if you want to make your time coming easier on your family members.
Yeah, 100%. So it can be overwhelming though. Like if you sit down and actually think about it, hundreds of accounts, hundreds of passwords, tons of things that you don't even think about. Like you talked about titles and where you keep the spare keys. Gosh, I wouldn't even thought about that, because like my husband knows where I keep the spare keys, but my parents don't know where I keep the spare keys. Like, God forbid my husband and I get in an accident and we both pass away, like my family has no idea where any of that stuff is, no matter how well they know me. Like, they'd be searching through drawers and cabinets and everything else in between for ages to try and find that. So it can be extremely overwhelming. How should someone approach filling this out to try and mitigate some of that?
Yeah, I would say start with what you know right off the top of your head. You do not have to do this all in one sitting. Make it like a weekly project. There are little sections in here, so break it down section by section, maybe fill out one a day. And I know that some of these things will change. The password to your Netflix. I forget my Netflix password almost every single time I log in, and I have to click forgot password and go through the whole rigmarole there. But some of these things will stay the same, like the location of your safe. You're probably not going to move that around too often. So start with what you know and then break it down section by section, one day at a time. And involve your spouse or a trusted family member. They may know the details like you don't, like the alarm code or streaming services, like I just talked about Netflix. And I know that in many family relationships, there might be one spouse who does the financial stuff, one spouse who pays the bills. So make sure that you're really communicating that with your spouse and with your partner so that if something were to happen, they would at least know where to start. And sitting down and filling out this guide with your spouse or with a parent would be a really great place to start there.
And then once someone gets it all filled out, where should it be stored? What are your thoughts on that?
I recommend making copies. So make a couple copies, make sure each spouse has one, and have one that's easily accessible. If you have an office, keep it in the top desk drawer of your office. If you have a pantry where you stick some documents we still have a spot in our pantry where there's a phone book. Who even uses those anymore? But that sucker's not moving. That sucker's not going anywhere. I would stick that in our pantry right next to our old phone books, cookbooks, and then keep one in a protected location, like in your safe, and so that if you lose one, you can find the other. You know where the other one is. So make a copy and keep one in an easily accessible location, and maybe one in a little bit of a safer location.
And then I know from my standpoint of like, I want all of my families in our shared Dropbox. Like my family has a Dropbox that we all have access to so we can send documents back and forth. Like if you can put it in an online location too, like honestly, put it in an online location and then send a link to all of your family members, all of your kids, all of your parents, and then like title it information for like XYZ person, important estate planning. That way, like if something happens, they can go back in their email and search it from 6 years ago and it's still in their email. They've got the link, they've got all of that stuff. And it's just like you said, put it in a bunch of locations. That way there's no question of having to search for it. And you don't have someone coming in and saying, we filled this out, we took 10 hours to do it, but we don't know where grandpa put it. And then you're in the exact same situation that you were when you started this whole process. And you put in the 10 hours to fill it out. Can you dive into like, what happens if you don't do this? What happens if like, what's the risk of not completing this, not having this information accessible?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, through those two family examples that I gave, it could take months to get all of this figured out. Wrapping up someone's estate is unfortunately a very long process. And this could just cause you, not having this information could just cause you to hit more roadblocks and prolong that time. So if you have all of this taken care of, hopefully your family member, when the time comes, can just find this document and know exactly where your safe is, exactly what the combination is, and find a stack of all of the information that they need to wrap up your estate right there. This is really just the best tool, I think, to help people to keep their affairs in order. And I really think that after you fill this out, you'll find that you feel a lot more organized in your own personal life. You'll feel like you have everything more together because you have all of your information in one spot. So highly recommend taking the time, make it a family project this fall, and just get her done.
Yes, 100%. So if someone's ready to get her done and make it a family project, what are their next steps? Where should they be looking? Where can they find all of this information?
Yes. So you can go to the link in the show notes, scroll down to the bottom of the link, that page that pops up, and put in a couple pieces of information, and the form will be automatically emailed to you. So you can download that. That way you'll have a digital copy and you can print it off in order to have a physical copy as well. Or you can go to kenburke.com, look up Trust and Estates, and that webpage will be there as well.
Perfect, Paige. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to break this down and talk about something that probably gets overlooked more than it actually gets talked about, especially when it comes to estate planning, especially when it comes to just living lives as adults. Something that I know I am adding to my to-do list for my husband and I in the next couple months to start breaking this down. And it's a daunting thing. It's something we don't want to do, but something that I know everyone needs to do. I don't care who you are, what you do, where you're at in life. Like if you're anywhere from a college student to someone that's been around the block a time or two, you've got passwords that your family doesn't know. And so it's really important that we get all of those written down. Thank you for the time that you took to put this together and the free resource that you're giving to people. I appreciate it. I know everyone else does as well. So to all of our listeners out there, make sure you check out those show notes down below. We're going to have that linked so that you can go and find that free link for you guys and get started on this and get your affairs in order and just make it a family project, like Paige said. Paige, thank you for your time. And to all of you listeners out there, we will see you all on another episode of the CattleUSA Daily Podcast next time. Have a good one, y'all.